There is something about betting on yourself where you truly are 100% betting only on you. And yes, you're surrounding yourself with the right team, but the buck stops with you.
Hey, thanks for being here. My name is Leah. In this podcast, you'll get a different take on the world of founders, startups, and innovation. I was a broadcaster for 23 years, not a business exec, so it was a leap to go from TV to VC. But since I've been in this sector, I'm repeatedly amazed by the founders who put everything on the line and just start a company from nothing. Why would they do this? In this podcast, we'll find out. Joining me today is Nicole Janssen, co-founder and co-CEO of AltaML, an artificial intelligence company helping businesses across North America transform data into action. Nicole, thank you so much for doing this today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
This is tremendous. All right. You and I had a conversation a week or so ago, and you described yourself as a serial entrepreneur, and you just happen to be currently tackling AI and machine learning. Can you tell me, first of all, though, let's back it right up, how you actually became an entrepreneur in the first place?
I actually blame junior achievement, if you can believe it. All the way back in high school, I participated in the junior achievement company program. And my company built wooden piggy banks shaped like a bear. Now, ignore the actual product, but the love of doing my own thing, being in charge of my destiny, betting on myself came from that experience. And I tried a stint as an employee for about 6 months. I was a terrible employee, absolutely terrible. And then I decided, well, I guess I just have to be an entrepreneur. Well, I was probably the most junior employee at the company at the time. And I was asking things like, could I see the financials of the company? I have concerns about certain things. Or I think you need to take your culture in a little bit of a different direction. Let me help you with that. I was going a little bit beyond my position. Now, I'm all about go-getters and leadership, but I was definitely outside my guardrails, and it just taught me that I'm just bound to be an entrepreneur.
That is hilarious. Oh, my God. You also said, though, that your mom was an entrepreneur. Is that right?
Yes, my mom was also an entrepreneur. By accident, where she had worked had been government funded, and then the funding ended. And the client, one of their main clients, asked her to go out on her own and start her own business. And so she often refers to herself as a, forced entrepreneur. It probably wasn't where she wanted to land, but then ended up enjoying it. And I got to watch that journey through my teen years.
For sure. So what did you take away from her experience that inspired you?
I think what inspired me is the culture she built within her company. The agility, the grittiness, but the collaboration, and just she really truly made it a place for people to learn and grow and come together and work together. And I just really have always loved that idea that I could create a place for others to really, enjoy that part of their journey in their career. Because while I know that AltaML might be just a stopping point on people's career trajectory, I hope it's one that leaves an excellent mark on them.
Yeah, that sounds pretty great. I think you might be onto something there for sure. So let's talk a little bit about AltaML. So you're the co-CEO of AltaML. Tell me a little bit about the company.
So we build AI software, but we do it in an interesting way. We have a venture studio model where one side of the business works in corporate labs with enterprise organizations in the private sector, as well as public sector organizations, to sort of go from ideation of AI use cases all the way to built out integrated solutions. On the other side of the business, we identify opportunities for commercialization, and we spin off separate ventures, and we support those ventures in their growth. So we've kind of got two sides of the business. It keeps us hopping.
I bet it does. I bet it does. So now this is what, your third company now, roughly? So what keeps you coming back? I mean, especially because they're so varied and very different.
I think it's really hard to pass up a good idea. It's a fault of mine. I would like to be able to say, yeah, I'll let someone else do that. But when a really good idea comes across the path, it's hard to say no.
No kidding. So what is it about the good idea that just inspires you so much? Is it something that you just, like you said, you just can't let somebody else do it? You have to jump on it?
I think that it's also a little bit of would they do it the right way? Because of course every entrepreneur thinks that they are doing it the right way, and so that's part of it too. Just, let's be honest. We all of us who are stupid enough to be founders believe that we really know best, and so that's part of it. I think, I'm not sure. I feel like it's a bit of a disease.
A bit of a disease. That is kind of hilarious. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's not easy being a founder, and there's definitely days where I wonder why I made this life choice. So that's why I reference it being called a disease. But also, the further you get into it, the more it attaches itself to you. And you really can't, the idea of not being an entrepreneur now, like that's not an option. It's simply not an option.
Fair enough. Wow. So you said to me once that you come from the school of entrepreneurship where you're not a real one unless you've mortgaged your house to make payroll. Can you tell me a little about why you said that?
Sometimes I look at other ventures, or even the ventures that we support and we spin out of AltaML. And, we've got this larger AltaML with all of these processes and all of this great talent and this capital to put towards these new ventures. And we put people in that seat to run them. And I think in my mind, have we created a country club to grow a company in? Because in reality, that is not what it is like. We have mortgaged our house to make this entrepreneurial journey work. And most of the entrepreneurs that I know that are the ones that I absolutely look up to that have been incredibly successful have all had periods in their journey where they had to do that. I don't think you make the best decisions if you haven't gone through the really hard times.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. However, I have to tell you, that sounds absolutely terrifying to me. And you just laugh.
Yeah.
You're like, yep, sure is. Sure is terrifying. But see, this is the part I don't get. Like, why would you do that if it's that terrifying and the risks are so high?
Because there is something about betting on yourself where you truly are 100% betting only on you. And yes, you're surrounding yourself with the right team, but the buck stops with you. And there is something just so empowering when that works out. It's once you have that first win, it's infectious. You can't go back.
Okay, I get that. I've heard that actually from some of the other founders I've spoken with. There is something, yes, that keeps you coming back just like that. That win is so sweet, as you have said. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how terrifying this can be, but I've asked every founder that I've spoken to on this podcast to think back to one particular moment, and I'm sure there's many, but let's think of one when it was really intense for you. Because of course, we're talking about the founder mindset. So like, what happened? And then I want to dig into like, how did you think through that? How did you feel about it? That kind of thing. What story came to mind for you?
we had an investor come through in one of our rounds that had just started getting into tech. They were very interested in tech, very excited about investing in AltaML. We saw a great partnership, real synergy, strategic relationship there. We're a couple of years in. We're just about to go into our next round of fundraising. And we go to that investor to say, will you participate in the next round? Because it's very important to have your larger investors participating in future rounds. And they said, well, actually, we have been instructed by the regulator of our industry that we have to get out of tech. And so could we have all of our money back?
All of the money back?
And like right away? Like in the next 2 months?
Whoa! How did that feel?
So not only are we coming to a low point because we're getting ready for a fundraise, but now our last round lead investor is asking for all their money back.
Oh my God.
They are fully supportive of AltaML. They love the journey. They're actually disappointed they have to get out because the valuation has gone up significantly, but now they need all their money back in a very short window.
Oh my God.
That was and to boot, I'm in Portugal at the time, taking a holiday, finally taking a holiday.
Oh my, that is...
Thanks.
Right? Thanks for wrecking that. Oh, I can't even imagine. Oh my God. So what did you do?
We scrambled. We called every investor we could think of, and we pulled it out of the hat.
Wow. Okay, but what did that feel like? Okay, so let's say you're lying on the beach in Portugal. What does it feel like to get that phone call? I can't even imagine.
I mean, it's terrifying because all you start doing is you start thinking of how much money do I have on the mortgage that I can leverage? Do I have to do layoffs immediately? Every scenario is going through your brain and you're weighing which one or all of them do you have to look at because of the situation. But this had nothing to do with whether or not AltaML was a successful business. Mm-hmm. It had been growing. It had been doing all the right things. This just was completely out of our control and honestly out of the control of the individual who had made the investment from our investor. They were very disappointed to have to get out of tech. The regulator was forcing it on them.
Wow. Okay, but I'm still thinking about you lying on the beach getting the phone call. I'm thinking
the beach ends. Yeah. At that moment, you leave the beach.
I bet you leave.
The beach is no longer. The rest of that trip is not spent on the beach.
Fair enough. So what happened? So then I'm just trying to visualize this. So you're probably running back to the hotel. And then is it a situation where it's like crisis mode, where you're like on the phone and you're booking flights and you're making phone calls? Like, what does it look like?
Well, we did not want to leave Portugal. We were determined to have a vacation. But every day we had chunks of the day that we're making phone calls. And your board of directors is your first call.
Right.
And thankfully we have an exceptional board of directors who also started making calls.
Wow.
And so it really just was another reminder of why it's so important to have that best group of people as your board of directors. That can be your highest performing team in those crunch moments. They are the ones who are going to say, stay in Portugal. We are going to figure this out.
Right.
And when you are a founder, it's very lonely up there. There's not a lot of people. You can't be friends with anyone at the company. That's not appropriate.
Yeah.
You can't confide in others at the company. That's also not appropriate. You can't be saying, holy shit, I'm terrified to anyone at your company, because you're supposed to be like, no problem, we got this. All the while in the back of your brain, you're thinking, holy fuck, I don't got this.
I bet. Oh my gosh.
So your board can be that those people in your corner if you've got the right board.
Right, right. What else have you learned moving through an experience like that?
I think I've learned that don't take your eye off the ball. You've got to plan for the best case, but also the worst case scenario. What should have been happening is that instead of having conversations for investing with investors at each stage where we needed investment, we should have been having conversations with investors every day, all the time. Because then you would have had people in your Rolodex that were ready to go.
Right.
So that was definitely a learning from that instance. I think one of the other learnings I've learned as a founder is knowing when to let go of certain things. Because when you are a founder of 5 people on your team, you are the janitor, you are the bookkeeper, you are the office manager, you are every role there is, because somebody's got to do it.
Right.
And then when you're 10, 20, 50, 100, your role has to change, and you have to keep giving things up. And some things, they're things you've built. Some things, they're your baby. You love I wrote the company handbook back in the day, and I poured every bit of me into that handbook. And the day that I had to hand that over to my newest VP of people and say, please don't screw this up, was a very hard day, because that was my baby. That represented to everybody who joined us what our culture was. And so there's so many steps along the way as a founder. You have to be okay with giving it up, delegating it down, and knowing people might do it differently than you.
Right. But that's hard to do.
Oh, yeah. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Just have enough of yourself at different points where my VP people knows that if it's about our culture, she's going to need to keep me very enrolled.
Right.
If it's about other parts of the business, I'm totally fine with her running with it.
Right.
In her area. And so it's really just providing that clarity with your team of areas that will really hurt if they go in a direction that you're not aligned with.
Right.
And then being okay with the ones that aren't as important in those very key things, but that they're maybe being done differently than you would have.
Right.
But
maybe that's okay in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't grow. You can't get bigger. You can't get better if you don't let others in.
Right. Right. Nor can you perhaps get that support that you need, right? At times.
Exactly.
Wow. That is amazing. I'm always envisioning like the highs and the lows, like they're so high and they're so low. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Those lows are really low, but you can't beat those highs.
Wow.
And you know, your team is so much a part of that. But at the same time, those lowest lows and those highest highs kind of sit with you. And so the ride is quite the roller coaster. And if you've got the right team to support kind of in those inner bounds, so they're not hitting that lowest low and they're not hitting those highest highs, but they're there with you along the way, that will make you successful.
Yeah. No kidding.
They're truly the key.
They are the key. Okay, so we're using this roller coaster analogy, which is kind of fun. But your husband is on this ride with you in this company as co-founder and co-CEO. How does that work?
Yeah. Who thought that was a good idea? We fell into this by accident. We have both always been entrepreneurs. We both always said we would never, ever work together because we're just so different. And as AltaML came to be, we could see it needed both of our strengths there to succeed. And so some days it doesn't work. I'm going to be honest. Some days are tough. Some days we don't agree, and then that comes home with us. And that's not ideal.
No.
But together, we are better than any other CEO because of our range of skill sets. No CEO has the skills the two of us bring. And so when we divide and conquer, we lead very well.
That's amazing. But you said when it doesn't go well and it comes home, that is not ideal. What? Tell me a bit more about what that looks like.
You just love to dig into those lowest lows, don't you, Leah?
Well, they're so interesting to me because I think it's madness, personally. That's why I'm so curious about it.
Well, we've definitely had a teenage child sit across the dinner table from us and say, "So, clearly a bad day at work, huh?" As we're all sitting in silence at the dinner table.
That's quite the picture.
But, we are very different. We lead very differently. Our skill sets are very different. So when we get in each other's kitchen, it's frustrating.
Right.
Because it's definitely not the way that each other would have wanted to do it. And so then that's where the frustration gets created.
Yeah.
And so we keep having to, really remind ourselves, stay out of each other's kitchen. We trust each other. We're married to each other.
Yes.
We have implicit trust. But we also would do things differently than the other person. So it's really about, here's where we're going. We are both aligned to that. I've got this section. You've got this section. Let's just get there. Just ignore how I get it there, because it's none of your business.
I love it. So it's really about staying out of each other's lanes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. And the trust. I think that is essential. I think that would actually be essential, don't you think? Even if you weren't, a husband and wife team, if you're co-founders, for example, that trust has to be essential.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you mentioned your teenager there. I know you've got a couple teenagers like I do. How does it work in terms of your life? Because you're parenting. I mean, you're parenting the same kids. Like the co-CEOs are in the same house. How does that work too?
That is definitely complicated when people want to see both co-CEOs somewhere. Right. Because we try to always have one of us at home whenever possible, so that our kids aren't constantly being, shuffled to grandparents' houses, etc. So that is difficult because we're co-founders and co-CEOs. There's often this ask of, can both of us be there? And we just can't. So that's how we manage that piece. But our kids have grown up with us being entrepreneurs. They don't know any different. If you ask my 16-year-old daughter about being an entrepreneur, she says, "Are you kidding me? That is the last thing I would do. That's way too much work. I would never want to do that." And then you ask my 14-year-old son, and he says, "I'm going to be the founder of an AI company. Mine's just going to be cooler than yours because it's going to build robots." And so very different perceptions across the two kids as to their future in entrepreneurship. But I do think, just like myself growing up around an entrepreneurial mother, and my husband had entrepreneurs as parents as well. You see the highs and the lows, and you have this massive respect for that parent or those parents who are leaning in, betting on themselves, and and succeeding doing it.
Yeah.
It's really, while my mom was certainly busier as an entrepreneur than she was when she had her job, I gained far more respect for her and learned way more from her just by observing her as an entrepreneur. And so I do feel like, because I had that experience with my mom, and I actually got both sides of it with my mom, it's so easy to say, well, I'm not at home as much as I would be if I was doing something different. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I know that the number of hours I spend at home wasn't the key for me as a kid. It was the quality of that time.
Right.
And so that's really where I try to focus, is that I'm teaching my kids something by just letting them observe me doing this. But then the time that I spend with them, I'm really just with them.
Right. You're really present with them. Yeah. I think that's all we can do as parents, isn't it? Just to be super present in the time that we do have. No question. You've already said, Leah, you love to focus on the lows. So let's focus on the highs now too. Because as you know, as you've said many times, it keeps you coming back. You love it. There's something in there for your kids as well. But what would you want people listening to this to understand about being a founder from the high perspective? Like, how great is it? What do you love about it? What's special?
It's when you see your hard work pay off in sometimes the weirdest ways. It's often not the, yay, we hit the revenue target. It's the, oh my gosh, COVID just hit. We are asking our staff tomorrow to move to a remote company, and we have no idea how that's going to work. And we just say, this is all we know. Let's do it. And you watch this team, at the time we were 50 people, just within a day, adapt. We got this. We're a team. Just that close culture that we had built with this strong collaboration, it felt absolutely seamless to transition to a remote company in one day. And those are the little wins that are actually the biggest wins, because you think, wow, I built this team that could change on a dime and do it so seamlessly. And it's those wins that are actually the sweetest for me.
Yeah, I could see that. Sounds incredible. You must have been so deeply proud of your team and maybe even of yourself.
100%. Mm-hmm. We had our first, we have Friday socials. So we quit work at 4 every Friday, and we all have a beer together. Nice. And the first Friday rolled around, and we all just said, I guess let's get on Zoom. And so the whole company got on Zoom and drank a beer together. And, it was this relief. We did it. We all did it together. We made this work. And, it's just the most proud moment, just the goosebump moments that are really special.
No kidding. That sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. The one thing that's come up too, as I've spoken with founders for this podcast, is that there are entrepreneurs now that are starting to understand that they do have to take care of themselves a bit more than they have maybe previously. Or there's the younger entrepreneurs too that are just like, listen, I can't give everything away. I still have to look after myself, because how else am I going to lead my team? So they're starting to understand this. Do you see that as well?
100%. I say I was lucky enough, although everybody thinks that's strange, to be diagnosed with epilepsy in 2019. We were a year into starting AltaML. We had some health issues with with my husband's father. There was all kinds of things going on at the moment, and my husband woke up beside me having a seizure in the middle of the night.
Scary.
Had never, as far as I knew, had a seizure before. And it began a very scary journey of discovering that I had epilepsy for at least the previous 5 years and didn't recognize it. I'd been having what I thought were panic attacks brought on by stress, but in fact they were seizures. And that really brought to the forefront my health. My health had to be number one. So my triggers are alcohol, stress, and lack of sleep.
Right.
So those are all things that come along often with entrepreneurship.
For sure.
And so I began a journey of really diving into what does healthy look like for me, because it's different for everyone.
Sure.
I have a certain number of hours per week that I cannot work more than 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
Or I know that impacts my epilepsy. And so I put into my contract with our board and said, if I'm going to record my hours weekly, and if I go over 50, I want to be part of my bonus to be paid on that.
Wow.
And so I've made it's a priority. I can't be a co-founder. I cannot be successful if I am battling my epilepsy and I'm not taking care of myself.
Right.
So that comes first.
Yeah.
But it's diet, it's exercise, it's all of those things. And I actually think it makes me a better founder, not only because I'm showing my team that it's important for them to put their health first so they can be their best selves, but also because it forces me to delegate things that I could have maybe just worked an extra 10 hours before and got it done myself. I can't. It's not an option. And so that's why I say it's actually been a gift that I got this diagnosis, because it's forced me to be healthy, which I don't know if I would have chosen that path quite as easily if it wasn't forced on me.
I could see that. And yet here you are saying that you think it's actually made you a better founder.
100%.
Wow.
Absolutely. I need our team to take care of themselves. They are absolutely far better at their jobs if they're taking care of themselves than if they're grinding the midnight oil and, killing themselves.
Yeah.
They won't be able to give their best.
No, they won't. But of course, we all have this romantic idea of, what it looks like to be a founder and grinding away so hard and sweat and all the things, that you see in the movies. And so how has this diagnosis then sort of changed that mindset for you? Right? We can't hang on to that romantic, unrealistic vision.
Yeah. And it was forced on me, like I said.
Yeah.
So there was definitely some acceptance, begrudging acceptance of it. But it really also helps me recognize in others when they're not taking care of themselves, because I'm forced to. I can see it, and I have a few people who report to me that I am constantly their biggest nag on. I noticed you online last night at 9 p.m. Why were you online at 9 p.m.? Is that fitting within your boundaries? And so I know that some of my staff think this is crazy that their boss is telling them to work fewer hours, but it's who I am. I see it in others really easily now, and it's a real key focus of mine.
Wow, I can imagine. Thank you for sharing that story. Let's move on to this notion of impact. So as you know, at Thin Air Labs, we are all about creating global human impact. And I know it's important for you personally and for AltaML. Can you talk a little bit about both? Why don't we start with what impact looks like for you personally?
For me personally, I actually been diving into this lately through Peter Diamandis puts out this mindset podcast, and asking about, what's that ultimate goal of yours? And as I've really dug into it and asked myself, the biggest thing for me is growing and supporting the growth of individuals and ecosystems that are maybe the underdog. I feel like Canada is the underdog in AI.
Right.
But we have a real opportunity to grab a hold of the title of the global leader of responsible AI. Because the other two leaders in AI, China and the US, I'm sorry, they're never going to get that title. And so Canada can lean into that and get some swagger and get a hold of this title. And so I've been really pushing from where I can push at the federal level, the provincial level, and even the municipal level of what are we doing to grab a hold of that title. And I see that in myself with individuals as well. When I see someone at the company that I see so much potential in, but maybe their resume doesn't say they should be in a certain role, or those are the people that I get so inspired to lean into and support because you just see something in them. And so that sort of supporting and bringing up that underdog's a terrible word, but I think you know what I mean.
Yes.
The ones that don't have this beautiful path laid out on a platter in front of them.
Right. That's exciting. Okay, so then how do you see that specifically in terms of AltaML creating this impact?
I think AltaML, not only does it give me the platform to be on board of directors for Edmonton Unlimited, for example, and support Edmonton in that way, to be on the board of directors for MyTax and support the research that's happening and getting that into industry in Canada. But it also provides, I believe we can be the industry voice or one of the industry voices at the table to really get this title for Canada. And it's going to require academia, industry, and government to come together. And so industry is probably going to have to drive it initially. And there isn't a person I've spoken to in Ottawa that hasn't heard me talk about this, because I make sure it lands into every conversation I have. So I do feel like AltaML really allows for that platform for both myself and our team to be part of creating this amazing ecosystem in Canada.
I love this. That's so exciting. Okay, as we start to wrap this up, this is called the founder mindset. So if you could talk to a young founder and tell them what should they think about, how should they think about being a founder, is there one sort of bit of advice or insight that you would want to share?
This isn't as glamorous as the movies make it seem. This is really, really hard. But the reward on the other side is so sweet. I actually kind of think it's similar to parenting, where the win, the moments that are so beautiful with being a parent are about 10% of the time. The other 90% is really terrible, honestly. It's really quite terrible. But that 10% is so sweet that you would never, ever give up the 90%, because that 10% is just, it's a magical thing.
It is.
So I feel that's the same for founders, is the highs are far fewer than the lows, but they are incredibly sweet. And I do think that piece of advice I kind of shared before is just get ready for every 6 months, your role has to change. Yeah. And you have to give up more of what things that you've been doing to other people to continue to allow the company to grow and be its best self.
Yeah. Which, as we discussed, can be pretty tricky, but necessary. There you go. Thank you for that, Nicole. All right, so if we're looking down the road and into the future, how do you hope the story of AltaML goes?
So in the past, my husband and I have sold a business, and we sold it to a U.S. company. And because we thought that we couldn't take it to the next level. We didn't see others around us that were taking companies like this to the next level. So it felt like, I guess we have to sell to a U.S. company to take it to the next level. It was a successful sale. It was one that came at the right time. But as we watched what they did with it, we realized we could have done that. Why didn't we have the swagger, the confidence to believe that we could have done that? And so with AltaML, it's really important to us that we're growing a company in Canada, and it's going to stay in Canada, and we're going to continue to own it. As my husband says, it will be pried from our cold dead hands. That's a little bit extreme, but that gives the sentiment of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build $1 billion company in Canada and keep it in Canada and grow the wealth within Canada. So that's the long-term goal.
Sounds amazing. Nicole, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
The global competition for talent requires proactive solutions. Whether it's growing and retaining our tech-skilled workforce through investments into local companies or companies looking to establish a presence in Calgary, or expansion of work-integrated learning and training for the digital economy, the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund is helping to meet Calgary's growing demand for tech talent. Find out how OSIF is funding our future at opportunitycalgary.com.